Goldman Sachs now finds itself in the middle of one of the world's biggest alleged heists.
A big debut expected tomorrow for the Goldman Sachs initial public offering.
And I believe we share the conviction that this is in the best interest of all Americans.
We still, like all businesses, have to change and evolve.
Goldman Sachs. You've probably heard about them before. In case you didn't know, they are considered by many to be the most prestigious investment bank in the world. They operate in 30 countries and are listed in the stock exchanges of New York, London, and Tokyo. With more than $1.33 trillion under their control, according to their latest quarterly report, they are the fifth largest in the United States by total assets. Also, former Goldman employees include U.S. Treasury secretaries, White House advisors, and leaders in central banks and governments around the world. That's what you call connected. However, in recent years, Goldman Sachs has been in the news for the wrong reasons. Today, we'll learn about the history of Goldman Sachs and its numerous fraud and scandals across the years, including the biggest foreign bribery case in U.S. history. Let's dive in. How it all started. It all started in 1869, when German immigrant Marcus Goldman began helping other small businesses secure short-term capital. He basically served as a broker between banks and entrepreneurs, keeping a small piece of the investment the small business received from a bank. In 1882, Goldman's son-in-law, Samuel Sachs, joined the firm. 3 years later, Goldman's son, Henry, and his other son-in-law, Ludwig Dreyfus, followed suit, resulting in the company changing its name to Goldman Sachs & Co. In 1896, Goldman joined the New York Stock Exchange. Founder Marcus Goldman would die in 1904 and leave Henry Goldman and Samuel Sachs in charge as co-senior partners. In 1906, the firm entered the IPO market when it took department store Sears public. Also, Goldman was one of the first banks to advise clients to buy back stock shares whenever their price dropped. In 1917, during World War I, Henry Goldman resigned after facing growing pressure from the other partners in the firm due to his pro-German stance. What's more, according to Goldman Sachs' website, this caused conflict between the Goldman and Sachs families. The departure would also lead to a rift between the Goldman and Sachs families that would last for decades. Henry Goldman and Samuel Sachs never spoke again. The Sachs family gained full control of the firm until a guy named Waddell Catchings joined the company in 1918. By 1928, Catchings was the Goldman partner with the single largest stake in the firm. On December 4, 1928, the firm launched the Goldman Sachs Trading Corp., a closed-end fund. The fund failed during the stock market crash of 1929 amid accusations that Goldman had engaged in share price manipulation and insider trading. Fast forward to the 40s and 50s, and the bank began a close relationship with the U.S. government due to their help financing both World War II and the Korean War. Goldman helped clients as big as Ford, and further ahead, Microsoft and Twitter with their IPOs. The firm introduced paperless trading to the New York Stock Exchange in the 90s and became public in 1999, same year that Henry Paulson became first Goldman CEO. It's fair to say that up until that point, Goldman enjoyed its status as arguably the most prestigious investment bank in the world. However, the following 2 decades would see the firm involved in some of the biggest frauds in banking history. Oh, and did I mention they played a key role in the 2008 housing market crisis? While I could probably make a 30-minute video on Goldman Sachs scandals, frauds, and controversies, I'll mostly talk about 3 of their biggest ones to date. Involvement in European sovereign debt crisis. Back in 2001, Greece was looking for ways to disguise its mounting financial troubles. The Maastricht Treaty required all Eurozone member states to show improvement in their public finances. But like a cat walking into a dog park, Greece was heading in the wrong direction. This is where Goldman Sachs comes in, arranging a secret loan of 2.8 billion euros for Greece, disguised as an off-the-books cross-currency swap, a complicated transaction which converted Greece's foreign currency debt into a domestic currency obligation using a made-up market exchange rate.
And Goldman's kind of bright idea was, let's do a swap where we change these foreign currency bonds into euros, but we do it at a fake exchange rate. And we go into a different exchange rate to the current one, and that means you shrink these bonds by 2.8 billion euros.
Griekenland schakelde de Amerikaanse bank Goldman Sachs in.
The unit in charge of the loan was headed by future Goldman CEO Lloyd Blankfein. Remember the name, because he'll be important later on. As a result, about 2% of Greece's debt magically disappeared from its national accounts. For its services, Goldman received a whopping 60 million euros, according to Spyros Papanikolaou, head of Greece's Public Debt Management Agency in 2005. After the 9/11 attacks, bond yields plunged, resulting in a big loss for Greece due to the formula Goldman had used to compute the country's debt repayments under the swap. By 2005, Greece owed almost double what it had put into the deal, pushing its off-the-books debt from 2.8 billion euros to 5.1 billion. In that same year, the deal was restructured and the 5.1 billion euros in debt locked in. So basically, Blankfein and his team helped Greece hide the true extent of its debt and in the process almost doubled it. Now, there's no doubt that years of corruption and tax avoidance by the wealthy played a part in Greece's finances. Also, Goldman wasn't the only bank that helped Greece in their debt magic act. However, Goldman wasn't an innocent bystander. The company arranged swaps that effectively allowed Greece to borrow 1 billion euros without adding to its official public debt. Also, while it arranged the swaps, Goldman also sought to buy insurance on Greek debt and engage in other trades to protect itself against the risk of a default on those swaps. A standard banking practice that essentially means shorting eventually, Goldman sold the swaps to the National Bank of Greece. In true Goldman fashion, with the global economy reeling from the aftermath of the housing bubble, the firm offered Greece another gimmick. In early November 2009, 3 months before the country's debt crisis became global news, a Goldman team proposed a financial instrument that would push the debt from Greece's healthcare system far into the future. This time, though, Greece didn't bite. A new Greek government revealed the truth of the country's fiscal deficit and later got bailed out by the EU after nearly going bankrupt. As a result, Greeks may have to live with stiff austerity measures for years, if not decades. Role in 2008 housing bubble. Between 2005 and 2007, Goldman Sachs, alongside many other Wall Street giants like Lehman Brothers and Morgan Stanley, played a part in the 2007-2008 housing crisis. A Senate investigation found that Goldman Sachs falsely assured investors the securities it sold were backed by sound mortgages, when it knew that they were full of mortgages that were likely to fail. Goldman Sachs, led by Lloyd Blankfein, was allowed to convert to a banking holding company and received $10 billion in government funds, which it eventually repaid. To his credit, Blankfein admitted the firm's responsibility in the housing crisis and gave his view on the U.S. government bailing out Goldman.
On behalf of Goldman, accept any responsibility for the collapse of 2008?
Yes.
Are you in any way embarrassed that the U.S. taxpayer had to bail out Goldman?
We got funds from the government, and it's an embarrassing situation then, and it's embarrassing now.
Goldman was sued by the SEC, or the Securities and Exchange Commission, and had to attend several Senate hearings, where many of their top executives, including Blankfein, got blasted by senators. Senator Carl Levine, who at the time headed the subcommittee that held the hearings, said Goldman made money in 2007 from betting that housing prices would fall. Goldman Sachs made billions of dollars from betting against the housing market, and it placed those bets in some cases at the same time it was selling mortgage-related securities to its clients, Levine said in a statement. Here's what Blankfein said in a statement of his own. During the 2 years of the financial crisis, while profitable overall, Goldman Sachs lost approximately $1.2 billion from our activities in the residential housing market. The reality is, both men might be right. Goldman may have made a profit on its mortgage bets in 2007, then lost enough in 2008 to wipe out the previous year's profits. It's worth noting, though, that because of that profit, they lost billions less than other firms when the market crashed in 2008. Goldman ended up paying a staggering $550 million and agreed to reform its business practices to settle SEC charges that Goldman misled investors in a subprime mortgage product, just as the U.S. housing market was starting to collapse. In agreeing to the SEC's largest ever penalty paid by a Wall Street firm, Goldman also acknowledged that its marketing materials for the subprime product contained incomplete information. In 2016, Goldman Sachs reached a settlement with the Department of Justice to pay $5.6 billion for misleading investors leading up to the 2008 financial crisis. Lastly, Blankfein was one of the few players in the crisis who retained his position. He remained CEO of Goldman Sachs until 2018, when current Goldman CEO David Solomon took over. 1MDB scandal. Between 2012 and 2013, Goldman Sachs paid $1.66 billion in bribes to individuals associated with 1MDB, the Malaysian government's development fund, and to Abu Dhabi's state-controlled International Petroleum Investment Company, IPIC, according to the U.S. Department of Justice. The bribes were paid to secure contracts under which the bank launched 3 international bond issues in 2012 and 2013, totaling $6.5 billion, of which the bank took a hefty $600 million in fees. The bribes were also aimed at leading to more business from the Malaysian government. The bond issues were financed from Goldman's own resources, and some of the proceeds, estimated at between $2.5 and $4.5 billion, were swiftly distributed by the bank's executives into a host of international accounts, including many offshore, tax haven-based shell companies. Major beneficiaries of the cash that was laundered through assorted shell companies were associates of the Malaysian Prime Minister, most notably Zhou Lo, who masterminded the grand schemes and is wanted by the police in a number of countries. Funds flowed on a vast scale into the accounts of the former Malaysian Prime Minister, Najib Razak, who is now appealing a Malaysian court sentence of 12 years in jail, and the accounts of at least 3 senior Goldman Sachs executives. 2 of them have been criminally prosecuted. Among these executives are Tim Leisner, former Goldman partner in Asia, and Roger Ng, who is the former head of investment operations for Goldman in Malaysia. Goldman Sachs set aside a staggering $1.09 billion to settle allegations with the Department of Justice, DOJ, for its part in arranging $6.5 billion in loans from Malaysian Development Fund, 1MDB, that was later stolen by Leisner, Roger Ng, and others. Leisner didn't act alone in the scheme that put one of the world's most prestigious financial institutions right in the middle of what may be the biggest bank fraud in history. Prosecutors accused ex-Goldman employees Leisner and Ng, along with Lowe, of using the funds to buy luxury U.S. properties and yachts, along with art, as well as paying bribes, and movies like The Wolf of Wall Street. Court documents highlight more than $200 million alone went to Leisner and Roger Ng. The investigations were conducted by government authorities in Malaysia, the United States, the UK, Singapore, and Hong Kong. And perhaps fittingly, Goldman had to reach financial settlements in each of these countries. In July of 2020, the firm agreed to pay Malaysian authorities $2.5 billion and guarantee that the government of Malaysia receives at least $1.4 billion in funds stolen from 1MDB. Standard practice when big corporations are caught red-handed in bribery scandals is for the management to publicly blame a few rogue employees and, at most, imply an apology by stating that improvements in its normally robust compliance systems will be made. To its credit, Goldman Sachs management has taken full responsibility, something rarely seen in banking scandals. In a public statement, Chairman and CEO David Solomon stated, "We, as a firm, have to accept responsibility and recognize the broader failure that individual behavior represents for our firm. We have to acknowledge where our firm fell short." In total, the bank has agreed to pay around $5.5 billion to settle charges brought against it by a slew of national authorities. Yes, $5.5 billion. No wonder many call it the biggest bank fraud in history. To date, Goldman's are the largest fines of their kind paid by a U.S. corporation to foreign government officials. Goldman's dubious business practices are too widespread not to mention them, and while they're not as big as the ones we discussed in detail in this video, I'll go over them briefly. Goldman Sachs was charged for repeatedly issuing research reports with extremely inflated financial projections for Exodus Communications, and Goldman Sachs was accused of giving Exodus its highest stock rating, even though Goldman knew Exodus didn't deserve such a rating. On July 15, 2003, Goldman Sachs, Lehman Brothers, and Morgan Stanley were sued for artificially inflating the stock price of RSL Communications by issuing untrue or materially misleading statements in research analysis reports, and paid $3,380,000 for settlement. Insider trading cases in 1986 and 2010, among others. In 2012, Greg Smith, vice president at the time, resigned after 12 years in the firm through a letter in the New York Times, claiming Goldman's problem was a change from a client fiduciary model, doing what's best for the client, to an use the client to extract wealth model. Conclusion: Goldman has established itself as one of the biggest and most recognized financial institutions in the world. However, as the years have gone by, more and more of their shady practices have come to life. And while they're certainly not the only Wall Street institution guilty of many of these corrupt schemes, they have stood out in some of the biggest banking scandals in history. One thing is certain, you probably won't ever see Goldman the same as before you watch this video. Over to you now. Do you think Goldman will ever restore its prestigious reputation and gain the public's trust back? And most importantly, do you think I left out any important details about their controversial history? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, where you'll get business, investing, and finance content. After doing that, give yourself a pat on the back and carry on with your day. Cheers.